it's Tammy with Shabby Fabrics. I have a fun project for you today. This is the Door Banner Club September from Riley Blake. Now, if you are not in the club and you are seeing this video and you think, hey, I'd really like to do that, or you are in the club and you'd say, oh, I have a friend that would really like to have that kit, we do have a very limited number of kits available on our website. So make sure you check that out. Let's talk about a couple elements here in the pencils. We have a pencil point, which is done with foundation paper piecing. Foundation paper piecing is something that we do here at Shabby Fabrics a lot. And we would like to show you our method of doing foundation paper piecing. Maybe you'll pick up some really good tips, even if you already know how to do it. The other thing we're going to do is some strip piecing. I've got some tips for you on strip piecing, long skinny strips, and a couple little bitty sew and flip pieces that we're going to look at. So without much more, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we'll start with some sew and flip. So I have here a sew and flip. This is the top of the eraser. And one thing that I do when I cut out pieces is everything is labeled with a letter when you're cutting. You need to definitely label all of your fabrics. It's going to help you keep all of these pieces straight. Just lay them all out on a design board or next to your machine. So then you've just got everything laid out. You know exactly what you're doing, what piece you should be grabbing for. So here I have my little AA square and my E rectangle. So what I've done is I have sewn on the diagonal. You can do sew and flip a couple of ways. The easiest way is just to simply draw a friction line like this, sew on the line, cut it, and flip it just like this. All right? So when I did this, I just eyeballed this because it's just a tiny little square. It's 3/4 of an inch. It's very small, and I can easily eyeball that from corner to corner. It's kind of like driving a car. You don't look at the needle, you look at where you're going and you sew right to that corner. That's how I did these. So let's take a look at that. Whenever I do that, I always like to flip these first before I trim it, just to make sure that I do have that exactly where I want it. Anytime you're dealing with small pieces, you're just going to watch your accuracy because these tiny pieces, boy, it really shows. If you're off just a little bit, it's really going to be apparent. Okay, so I'm just going to do a double check on sew and flip here. And I can see that these edges are even and that I'm okay to go ahead and trim my 1/4 inch away. Grab my rotary cutter here. And we're just going to trim that just like that. 1 and 2. So I'm not trimming very much away. All right. So that piece is now ready to go. Let's just leave that right there. All right. The next piece I have is the other part of the eraser. This is the top of the eraser. This is the metal portion of the eraser. I just have rectangles. I've sewn them together and press that open. And that's going to go on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and attach that. Let's go ahead and line those up. And I'm going to use an extra fine patchwork pin. These are by Clover. They're my favorite pin. And I'm going to pin this about right here. This is the only pin I'm going to put in this. I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch starting here all the way to the end. I place my pin out of my seam allowance. It's dropped down so that I can sew here to here without stopping. So you can see my seam allowance. You're really going to want to watch that seam allowance. If you have a problem with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I know a lot of us do, I would suggest a seam setter guide. This little tool attaches around your needle onto the bed of your sewing machine. This little seam guide is sticky and it sets right down in the groove. Boom, you know exactly where your perfect 1/4 inch is. I love that. I use it all the time. You saw me use it just now. And you can see it's a perfect 1/4 inch. And then if you run out of the little stickies, we do have a refill pack with 6 more, but they're reusable. So they stick on your machine, come off, go back on your machine. Okay? All right, let's press this out. I'm going to press this towards the pink, away from the white. There we go. All right, so that's the top part of my pencil. I'm just going to set that aside for now. And the next thing I'm going to do is the little flying geese. Grab my little pieces here. All right, so the little flying geese, again, small pieces. So I have an A rectangle. I have some little colored squares here. Let's do it. This one, let me grab a hold of one of these, maybe. Okay, so I'm going to lay it on here, sew and flip, and again, you can draw the line, you can just go for it and sew it. The other tool that I use for this is I use the Cluck Cluck Sew Tape. I love that Cluck Cluck Sew Tape. Let me show you how that works. Okay, so I'm here at the sewing machine, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my needle, and I'm going to line up this corner with this red line on the Cluck Cluck Sew Tape. That is exactly where my needle is. So when we installed this on the machine, this line is right here where our needle is. This is a 1/4 inch to the right. This is a 1/4 inch to the left. So when I put this on here, like this, I can see that this is right in the middle. Move my hand over here so I make sure you can see. This corner now is right on this red line. I know that I'm going to sew directly down the center of this. So whenever I do that, I'm going to go ahead. This is, again, a small piece. Let's test it first. Oh, yeah, that looks just like what I want it to. Okay. So then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to trim it, put the next one on. You get the idea. It's exactly like what we just did. So I'm going to make 3 of them, and I'm going to put them together. And I did that and press my seams open. Open is really important here. It's going to sharpen these points right here, which is what I wanted. I want those points to be nice and crisp. So I did press those open. So I'm going to set that piece aside. Gather all my scraps here. All right. So the next thing we're going to build is we're going to build the foundation paper piecing. So let's talk about that. This is the foundation template that's in your pattern. You're going to take this, and what I did was I just put this on the copy machine and just made a copy, but I used Carol Doak's foundation paper. I recommend this paper because it is very nice. When you're stitching through it, it does remove cleanly. And that's important because we definitely want to take the paper off when we get this project to a certain point. All right? So you're going to take your template, make a photocopy of it. Make sure that you're making just a copy. You don't want to make it bigger or smaller. All right? Okay. So then I'm going to cut this out. So I cut this out a 1/4 inch beyond the dark line. The dark line on the outside is our cutting line. This dotted line right here is actually my seam allowance once this is sewn completely into the project. So right now I'm going to concentrate on this outside line, and I went a 1/4 inch beyond that. Okay? All right, I have all my pieces here. I have 2 JJ rectangles, I have a C square and a D square. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a C square. So I'm going to use a sew line glue stick right here. What I want to do is I want to get my first one is number 1, and that is my C square. And I took my label off. Maybe I shouldn't have done that yet. So we're going to follow the number. When you do foundation paper piecing, we're going to sew by number. All right, so number 1 is my C square, which is my large white square. 2 is my D square. 3 is a JJ rectangle. 4 is a JJ rectangle. Okay, so my C square, we're going to place our fabric on the reverse side of this. You see how that fits right on there? Well, I want to make sure that actually stays there. So I'm going to take my glue. I'm just going to kind of put a little glue in the center. I'm going to place this on here and kind of glue that in place. All right, that's a Sew-Line glue stick. So now if you hold this up to the light, you can actually see through this, and you can see that number 1 square covers all the way to the outside edge. I like that. I like coverage all the way around on this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take an add a quarter ruler. I love these little rulers. I use them twofold. One, they have a lip on them. Right here, you can see this lip is a 1/4 inch, exactly a 1/4 of an inch, and that is used when you're trimming your fabric. So that's why it's called add a quarter. So you're adding a 1/4 to your seam allowance. All right. The other thing I use it for is I use this straight edge is flat and narrow, and I use this to lay down and fold my paper on. Let me show you how I do that. So the first, where am I even sewing this? Let's talk about that. The first place I'm going to sew is between number 1 and number 2. I'm going to start a little bit before and end a little bit after. So I'm going to sew on this line right here between 1 and 2. So I'm going to take my ruler with this, it's upside down now. This is the flat edge. This has a bevel to it, making this a sharper edge. So it's upside down, and I'm going to put this right on the line between 1 and 2 and take my paper and fold it back, make a crease, remove the ruler, and make a sharp crease, just like that. Now I'm going to flip my ruler over, and now I'm going to use this little lip on the edge to grab a hold of this paper. So when I slide this along, you see how I can't move it? It's snug right up against that paper. I know I'm adding a perfect 1/4 inch to this fabric. So let's go ahead and trim that there. Just like that. Okay. All right, now we're ready for piece number 2. Piece number 2 is my D square. Let me take my label off of that. All right. So 2 has to cover this triangle right here. And I know that this giant square will easily cover that, right? Okay, so let's turn it over. And I can kind of hold this up, and I can see through the paper, I can see number 2 through it. And I'm centering my black square right on that. Okay, so I know that when I go to sew this on the front of the paper, I sew it. Now when I flip it over, this black is going to completely cover this triangle. All right, so let's take a pin and actually hang on to that. Now if you're an experienced foundation paper piecer, you may not need to put a pin there, and that's fine. For those of you who are beginning, I recommend pinning it, because now on my way to the machine, it's not going to go anywhere, right? Okay, so I'm going to go to the machine, and like I told you, I'm going to start here, sew across the line and end here. The other thing that I'm using is a Microtech sharp needle. The size is 70-10. The reason it's a smaller needle, smaller hole, smaller stitch. That's what we want. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce my stitch length drastically. We normally sew with a 2.35 on this machine. 2.5 I think is the default when the machine comes on. I'm going to lower this all the way down to 1.5. So I have little tiny stitches which perforate the paper, which make it easier to tear away. All right, so I'll see you at the machine. Okay, here we are at the machine. My pin is all the way down here, so I'm not going to hit it. I'm starting before my line, and I'm going to end after it. Here we go. All right, this looks a little funny, I will admit, but it's right. All right, so I'm going to take my pin out. Now, we're going to open this up and press this. Sometimes when you're pressing on paper like this that has ink on it, that can transfer to an ironing board or your iron. I like to use a clover roll and press. I love this tool. This just makes my life so much easier. Now I can sit at my machine and do this and not have to get up and down and go to the iron. You can see what a nice crease this tool makes on here. It looks just like I pressed it. All right, so now I'm going to turn it back over to the paper side. Now we're going to look for section 3. Section 3 is right here. So now I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to flip it over so it's wrong side up and the beveled edge is down. I'm going to lay it along the line between number 1 and number 3. 1, 2 are now a unit. Now I need to add section 3. I'm going to fold this back. I want you to note how this came up because I sewed it. Remember, I sewed a little bit before the line and a little bit after. All I'm going to do is I'm going to rip the paper, leave the stitches in there. I'm just going to rip the paper just like that so that lays down. All right. I'm going to make a crease, remove the ruler, sharpen the crease just like that. You can double check, but I'm right on the line just like I'm supposed to be. Turn your ruler back over. Now it's right side up and I've got that lip on the bottom. Perfect. Lays right on there. I like that. It's not going anywhere. I know I'm adding a perfect 1/4 inch to my piece now. We're going to trim that away. Just like that. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to add a JJ rectangle. This rectangle is going to go on down. I'm going to line up the bottom corner and it comes over at the top. I'm okay with that. I'm way okay with this thing being bigger than the paper. I don't mind that one bit because I'm going to trim this up perfect when I get done with it. So it is way good that that paper comes, or that the fabric is going to come and over here and be way bigger than the paper. I don't care about that. That's all good. I'd rather it be bigger than shorter. All right, so I'm going to pin this because I know that I'm sewing on this line. I'm going to turn it back over. Now I'm going to sew from here, a little bit before the line, all the way up. I'm going to sew all the way off of this onto here. You can see how this line goes all the way off of the paper. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to take my pins, and now I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to go ahead and use my clover roll and press that seam. Oh, that's looking really strange, isn't it? Right? Hey, guess what? It's perfect. Good job. If yours looks like this, you're on the right track. I know you think I'm crazy, but this is perfect. All right, let's turn it back over. Let's do the very last one. As you guessed, my ruler comes over, upside down, right on the line. Rip the paper. That's okay. I don't mind it ripping right there. Make your crease. Middle piece right there. Fold him back. Turn your ruler over so your add a 1/4 is now in play. That 1/4 inch is grabbing hold of that. Trim. I'm going to turn it back over and take my last rectangle. Place it on here just like this. Right side down. Put a couple pins in this just because it's an awful large piece. I don't want that to move, especially on an angle. Okay, I'm going to go sew it and we'll be done. And we're going to press it again with the clover roll and press. Wow, that looks really cool. Perfect. All right, let's turn it over. And I'm going to grab my spinning mat. All right. I like to use a spinning mat when I'm squaring things up. So I'm going to use the Creative Grids spinning mat. I'm just going to use a little 3.5 by 6.5 inch ruler. I like this ruler. It's got a really nice 1/4 inch edge on it. You can see the dotted line, and it's got a lot of grippy material right underneath that 1/4 inch. I like that because I know it's not going anywhere. That's the line I'm going to use. I'm going to line up my ruler now with this solid outside line right here and right here. Just like that, and we're going to trim. I'm going to rotate and trim the next side. Rotate and trim the next side. Just always be careful that you are trimming just as exactly close to that line as you possibly can. There we go, just like that. All right, beautiful. There's my pencil point. I love it. All right, so now let's take a look. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this onto the bottom of it, and this will complete the pencil point unit. So before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the paper. To do that, I'm just going to fold it, and it just very easily comes away. This foundation paper is absolutely amazing. That glue just held it for a little bit. It didn't leave any residue here. There we go. Paper's off. You're ready to go. So I'm going to put this on here. I'm going to go ahead and pin this like this. I want to hold this seam allowance in place. I want these corners to stay together. And then I'm going to pin this end up here. Since there's a lot of pieces in this, I really do not expect this to fit perfectly onto this piece. This piece is foundation piece. I know it's perfect. This, you never know, right? There's a lot of little pieces going on there. And it's real life quilting here. I don't know. And see, it is a little bit different. So I'm going to take my 2 ends and I'm just going to give them an ever so slight pull, just like that. Then I'm going to reach with my fingers, grab that seam allowance, make it lay flat, put a pin in it. Same thing here. Give it an ever so slight tug, pull this, just like that. So now when I have that pinned, these are laying perfectly flat together. That's where I'm going to sew. I'm going to start here, go to here, and I'm going to watch these points right here. I want to sew right at the very top edge of these points. Then I know that I'll hit that point on the other side. Okay, let's go do that. All right, so let's take our pins out and take this to the iron. Now, when I look at how am I going to press this, all these seams definitely want to come back this way, and I'm going to let them do that. I think that's the best way to press this. So I'm going to set my iron down and give it a little pressure and push this that direction. That's better. I would rather do that than try to press these seams open. If you're pressing open, you're pressing all those seams right back on themselves. Sometimes that's not the best way to do it. All right, give our little pencil point a little bit of a press there and he will lay flat. All right, so I have a pencil point and an eraser. Let's take a look. I'm going to clear this mess and we're going to take a look at doing some strip piecing, and I'll give you some tips on how to make the pencils. Okay, so I'm back and I have some strip pieces that I have already sewn together for the pencil. I have 3 different yellows right here. So I'm going to show you the back on this. When I sew these together, I definitely press my seams open. We want this to lay flat. Now, in the cutting instructions, they're going to tell you to cut these to exactly the size you need. I'm going to recommend that you overcut these. I know that when I sew strips together, and no matter how perfectly I line up the top, the bottoms somehow do not come out right. Even when you've cut them all exactly the same size, it's very difficult to do. So I have overcut all of these strips, all right? I did that intentionally so that I can square this up and make sure that this end is perfectly square, and so is the bottom. All right, so I need to square this to 23 3/4. So I'm going to put this on here, and we're going to take a look at that. And first of all, I want you to notice how straight this is. There's not a lot of bowing to this. That's because when I pressed it this direction. I always press my strip sets vertically like this, because when you're pressing things horizontally across your iron, put this on your ironing board like this, and you're pressing this, when your arm is coming across, your arm naturally goes down here and comes down here in an arc. You don't press perfectly flat like this straight. Your arm is going to arc. When you arc your arm like that, you're going to create a rainbow effect on your strip, and your strip set is going to be arced. If that happens, take it back to your ironing board, spray it with some magic sizing, smooth it until it comes straight again, turn it over, and press it vertically from the back. And your strip sets will be much straighter and much cleaner, and I think you'll be a lot happier with them. All right, so let's go ahead and trim this up to 23 3/4. That'll do it right there. So I overcut these strips by quite a bit. When you're cutting this, you have plenty of fabric in your kit. Just cut a width of fabric strip for all of them, and you could just sew them all with the fabric, get them pressed out, and cut all your pencils just like that. You have plenty of fabric, all right? Okay, so now that I have my strip set cut to the proper measurement, now we need to stitch the pencil point to the top of this. So you can see how my colors all match. I'm going to slide this down just like this, turn this over. I'm going to line up. Now all my seams are pressed open, and it's very easy to line these up. Just give it an ever so slight tug and pull that seam open just a tiny bit, and you can make sure that you are directly right on top of that other seam. Let me go ahead and pin this on here, just like this. Whoop. All right, I am going to go ahead and pin this back corner here, because I know that these 2 corners are going to walk away from each other by the time I get there, and I want them to stay together. All right, there we go. Let's go sew this and make our pencil. All right, let's take our pins out. All right, now how am I going to press this? Well, obviously these seams want to come right back onto the pencil. I'm going to let them. They can come right back on here, and that's great. Yep, that works just fine. So here's how that looks from the front. Just like that. Perfect. There's our pencil. All right, now to do the eraser one, we simply make our piece and put our eraser on the top, and that's my eraser pencil right here. And then you're just going to follow the instructions and put your various spacers on, which are cut from your background fabric, and complete your wall hanging. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you got some good tips on how to do foundation paper piecing the Shabby Fabrics way. I'll see you next time on a Shabby Fabrics tutorial.